How long will you accept financial instability as if it were normal? What if the problem was never your income? What if the real reason progress never stabilizes has nothing to do with how much you earn, and everything to do with how your financial life is structured? Millions of people work harder every year. Millions increase their effort. Millions wait for the moment things finally change, yet the result repeats. Not because they lack opportunity, not because they lack intelligence, but because the mechanism that keeps them stuck remains invisible. And here is the uncomfortable question: if nothing changes in your financial life year after year, at what point do you stop blaming circumstances and start questioning your structure? People do not remain poor by accident. They remain poor by pattern. And today, you are going to see that pattern clearly. The real reason people remain poor: most people believe poverty is caused by lack of money. But money is only the visible symptom. The real cause is structural. Across different incomes, different economies, and different opportunities, the same outcome repeats. Effort increases, but financial control never stabilizes. Income changes, circumstances change, but the internal pattern remains. In this video, you will understand not only why this pattern persists, but how it is broken. There are 3 structural shifts that transform financial instability into controlled progress. First, protecting behavior before pursuing results. Second, building a system before increasing intensity. Third, expanding capacity before expanding exposure. When these shifts occur, money stops being the problem, because structure becomes the solution. Pillar 1. Protect your behavior before seeking results. Financial instability rarely begins with lack of income. It begins when behavior becomes unstable under pressure. Most people do not fail because they lack opportunity. They fail because their decisions change when emotion rises. When fear appears, they stop acting. When urgency appears, they act impulsively. When uncertainty appears, they postpone structure. This creates a cycle. Reaction replaces intention, and inconsistency replaces progress. To break the pattern of remaining poor, the first shift is behavioral protection. Behavioral protection means defining rules before pressure appears. It means deciding in advance how you will act when results are slow, when markets fluctuate, and when emotions intensify. Without predefined rules, every decision is negotiated in the moment, and decisions made under pressure are rarely stable. This principle appears repeatedly in foundational financial literature. In The Richest Man in Babylon, the idea of paying yourself first is not about income level, it is about consistent behavior independent of circumstance. Wealth begins when action becomes predictable. In Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the distinction between assets and liabilities is not merely informational, it is behavioral. Financial progress occurs when decisions consistently move resources toward productive assets. In From 1,000 to 1,000,000, disciplined saving and investing are presented not as strategies of sacrifice, but as structures that remove emotional volatility from financial growth. To understand why these principles are behavioral rather than financial, it helps to observe what each work actually emphasizes. In The Richest Man in Babylon, the central teaching is not about earning more, but about controlling what is already earned. The practice of consistently setting aside a portion of income creates a predictable pattern of action that does not depend on mood, confidence, or circumstance. The power of this idea lies in repetition. It transforms financial progress from an occasional effort into a stable mechanism. In Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the focus is not simply on acquiring assets, but on the decision pattern that directs money toward productive structures instead of consumptive habits. The distinction between assets and liabilities becomes meaningful only when behavior consistently favors long-term positioning over short-term comfort. The book highlights that knowledge alone does not change outcomes. Sustained behavioral alignment does. In From 1,000 to 1,000,000, the emphasis is placed on disciplined repetition and intentional allocation. Saving, investing, and increasing income are presented as coordinated actions within a structured process. The objective is not intensity, but continuity. Progress emerges when financial behavior becomes systematic rather than reactive. Across these perspectives, the message converges. Wealth is stabilized by behavior before it is increased by opportunity. Consider practical examples. A person decides to invest only when feeling confident. Confidence fluctuates, so action fluctuates. Years pass without continuity. Another person invests a fixed percentage of income regardless of mood or market condition. Emotion fluctuates, but action remains stable. Continuity forms. Accumulation begins. One person checks financial positions constantly and reacts to short-term movement. Another reviews periodically according to a predefined schedule. Both experience volatility. Only one experiences stability. Behavioral protection also includes reducing exposure to impulsive decisions. Automation, predefined allocation, and scheduled review are not conveniences. They are safeguards against emotional interference. When behavior is protected, 3 transformations occur. Uncertainty loses its power to paralyze. Fluctuation loses its power to provoke reaction. Time gains the space required to operate. This is why predictable behavior is more powerful than high income without discipline. High income without structure amplifies instability. Moderate income with stable behavior builds continuity. Continuity builds accumulation. Accumulation builds control. This is the first structural break in the pattern of remaining poor. You no longer depend on motivation. Financial progress does not come from moments of strong action. It comes from systems that continue when motivation fades. A system is not a strategy. It is a repeatable structure that operates independently of emotion. When there is no system, each decision must be reinvented. Each month begins from zero. Each setback interrupts progress. This is why many people experience temporary improvement but never structural change. You no longer depend on perfect conditions. You operate according to predefined principles. You stop reacting and begin operating with intention. Pillar to build a system before seeking intensity. Most people try to change their financial reality through intensity. They try harder, they push muddy. They react faster. But intensity without structure produces exhaustion, not stability. The pattern that keeps people poor is not lack of effort. It is fragmented effort without continuity. Financial stability follows the same logic. Predictable processes produce predictable direction. In the psychology of money, long-term financial success is associated less with intelligence and more with the ability to sustain reasonable behavior over time. Consistency of process is presented as more influential than intensity of decision. In your money or your life, financial transformation begins when money is organized within a conscious system of tracking, allocation, and review. To break the pattern, financial action must shift from effort-based to system-based. A system defines how money flows. When decisions occur, what remains constant regardless of circumstance. This principle appears clearly in multiple works that examine behavior and process, rather than outcome. In Atomic Habits, improvement is described as the result of small actions organized into consistent systems. Outcomes are not pursued directly, they emerge from structured repetition. Clarity emerges not from effort, but from structure that reveals and directs behavior. Across these perspectives, the same principle appears. Structure sustains progress when emotion cannot. Consider practical contrasts. One person saves only when expenses are low. Another defines a fixed allocation that occurs automatically. Both intend to save. Only one creates continuity. One person invests after analyzing market conditions repeatedly. Another invests according to a predefined schedule. Both seek growth. Only one eliminates hesitation. One person increases effort whenever finances feel unstable. Another improves the system that governs decisions. One reacts to instability, the other reduces it. Systems remove negotiation from the moment of action. When financial behavior is systematized, three shifts occur. Decision fatigue decreases. Consistency increases. Time becomes an active participant in progress. This is why structure is more powerful than intensity. Intensity produces movement. Systems produce direction. Movement without direction creates cycles. Direction creates accumulation. When a system exists, progress no longer depends on how you feel. It depends on what continues. This is the second structural break in the pattern of remaining poor. You stop relying on effort and begin relying on structure. Pillar 3, expand capacity. Before expanding risk, many people try to accelerate financial progress by increasing risk before increasing readiness. They seek faster results, larger exposure, greater intensity of return. But risk does not create strength. Risk reveals structure. When capacity is limited, higher risk amplifies fragility. When capacity is developed, risk becomes manageable and strategic. Remaining poor is rarely the result of insufficient opportunity. It is often the result of exposure that exceeds preparation. Capacity is not only financial. It is cognitive, emotional, and structural. Cognitive capacity determines how well you understand what you are doing. Emotional capacity determines how stable you remain when outcomes fluctuate. Structural capacity determines whether your decisions are supported by systems or by impulse. Without capacity, risk becomes pressure. With capacity, risk becomes a tool. This distinction appears clearly in works that examine preparation as the foundation of growth. In The Intelligent Investor, emphasis is placed on margin of safety, the idea that protection must exist before pursuit of return. The objective is not to maximize gain, but to minimize the possibility of irreversible loss. Preparation is treated as the condition that makes participation sustainable. In deep work, sustained focus is described as a rare and valuable skill that must be trained deliberately. Financial growth follows a similar logic. Concentration, learning, and discipline development expand capacity before results expand. In mindset, progress is associated with a growth orientation that prioritizes development over immediate validation. Capability is built through process, not proven through risk. Across these perspectives, the principle converges. Strength is constructed before exposure is increased. Consider practical contrasts. One person invests aggressively in unfamiliar assets seeking rapid multiplication. Another invests conservatively while expanding toggle knowledge, income stability, and decision clarity. Both pursue growth. Only one builds durability. One person increases financial commitments after a short period of success. Another increases commitments only after demonstrating consistent behavior across different conditions. One responds to emotion, the other responds to capacity. One person treats opportunity as urgency. Another treats opportunity as responsibility that must be supported by readiness. Expanding capacity involves 3 deliberate movements. First, strengthening knowledge of how money behaves within systems of production, allocation, and time. Understanding reduces unnecessary exposure. Second, stabilizing emotional response to uncertainty. Volatility is inevitable. Instability of reaction is optional. Third, increasing the ability to generate income independent of immediate circumstance. Greater productive capacity reduces vulnerability to temporary fluctuation. When capacity expands, risk transforms, uncertainty becomes measurable. Exposure becomes intentional, participation becomes sustainable. This is why patience is not delay, it is preparation. Those who increase risk prematurely experience amplified stress and inconsistent outcomes. Those who increase capacity experience expanding control. Control builds confidence. Confidence supports continuity. Continuity allows time to operate. This is the third structural break in the pattern of remaining poor. You stop chasing opportunity and begin becoming capable of sustaining it. How the pattern is broken. Escaping the pattern that keeps people financially stuck does not begin with earning more. It begins with changing structure. Financial instability persists when behavior reacts to pressure, effort lacks continuity, and risk expands without preparation. To break this cycle, three structural shifts must operate together. First, behavior becomes protected. Decisions are defined before emotion appears. Consistency replaces impulse. Action becomes stable even when circumstances are not. Second, effort becomes a system. Money follows a repeatable path. Decisions occur according to structure rather than urgency. Small actions gain continuity, and continuity creates accumulation. Third, capacity expands before exposure expands. Knowledge deepens. Emotional stability strengthens. The ability to generate value grows. Risk is no longer used to create change. It is used to support prepared growth. When these three movements align, a transformation occurs. Uncertainty stops controlling behavior. Pressure stops defining decisions. Progress stops being accidental. Financial growth becomes structural, and what is structural endures. Real change does not happen when circumstances improve. It happens when structure improves. Money responds to behavior. Behavior responds to structure. And structure is always a decision. If you understand this, financial progress stops being a possibility and becomes a process. You do not need perfect conditions. You need protected behavior, organized systems, and expanded capacity. That is how the pattern is broken. That is how stability is built. That is how control is created over time. Thank you for being here. Continue fortifying yourself.